After years of fighting and broken promises, she watched her husband leave for the last time. Abandoned, betrayed by her own family, and drowning in debt, she fell to her knees on the dark living room floor and whispered, "God, I can't take it anymore." The silence seemed eternal, until a stranger appeared at the exact moment she broke down in tears in the street. He had something in his eyes that she couldn't explain, and what began with a simple "Can I help?" turned into the most unexpected miracle God could give. You won't believe how this story of abandonment, faith, and a new beginning ends. It was a Tuesday when everything finally fell apart. Charlotte was immersed in that typical damp autumn fog, with orange leaves clinging to the wet asphalt and a sky heavy as if it carried the weight of the entire world. Sarah Mitchell was 34 years old, her brown hair always tied in a tired ponytail, dark circles under her eyes that told stories she preferred not to remember, and hands that trembled every time the phone rang, because it was usually someone demanding payment of a bill she had no way of paying. The house where she lived, a modest 2-story house in the Plaza Midwood neighborhood, hadn't felt like home for a long time. The walls held echoes of shouts, slammed doors, broken promises. For 7 years, Sarah had tried to hold on to that marriage with both hands, like someone trying to hold on to water slipping through their fingers. But you can't hold on to someone who doesn't want to stay, you know? And David, her husband, had stopped wanting to a long time ago. That night, he didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't threaten. He simply grabbed the backpack that was already packed behind the sofa, looked at her with a coldness that hurt more than any slap, and said, "It's over, Sarah. I'm tired." She still tried to say something, but the words died in her throat. The door closed. The car started, and the sound of the engine disappearing down the street was the loneliest sound she had ever heard in her life. Sarah stood there in the middle of the room, staring at the closed door as if she still expected him to come back. Apologize. Say it was just another fight. But no, this time it was different. She felt it in her bones. And when her legs couldn't take it anymore, she slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold floor, hugged her knees and let the tears fall silently, because even crying made her too tired. What came next was worse. When you're at rock bottom, you think at least your family will be there for you, right? But that's not what happened. Sarah called her mother the next day, her voice still hoarse from crying so much, and told her that David had left, that she was alone, that she needed help. The response came dry, cutting. "Sarah, you made your own bed. Now lie in it. I warned you that man was no good, but you didn't want to listen. Now deal with it." The older brother, Eric, was even more cruel. "I have my own family to take care of. I don't have the time or money to be saving a sister who doesn't know how to live." And he hung up. Just like that, without another word. The cousin who had always been close disappeared from social media. The aunt who swore she was a Christian said that sometimes God allows suffering so we can learn. And Sarah did learn. She learned that loneliness isn't just being alone. It's realizing that the people you thought would be there simply aren't. The bills started piling up like snow in a harsh winter. Rent overdue. Electricity cut off. Credit card maxed out. Sarah worked as an administrative assistant at a veterinary clinic, earning little, and with David leaving, half the rent simply evaporated. She sold what she could: the living room TV, some furniture, even the jewelry her grandmother had left her. Every day was a struggle just to get food, just to avoid being evicted. And it was on one of those nights, 3 weeks after David left, that Sarah fell to her knees in the middle of the empty room. She had no strength left. She had no plans left. She had nothing left. She lifted her face to the dark ceiling, hot tears streaming down her cheeks, and whispered in a broken voice, "God, I can't take it anymore. I tried so hard, but I can't do it alone. If you still care about me, please, please, show me that I'm not completely abandoned." Silence was the only answer. The house was cold, dark, empty. Sarah curled up on the old sofa, pulled up a worn blanket, and closed her eyes. Unsure if she would be able to sleep or spend another sleepless night, drowning in thoughts that led nowhere. But what she didn't know, and could hardly imagine, was that God was already moving the pieces. He was already preparing something she would never have dared to ask for because it seemed too good to be true. And sometimes, God doesn't answer by shouting. He answers by putting the right people on the right path, at the right time. The next morning, Sarah woke up with that weight on her chest that had become part of her routine. She dressed automatically, drank a weak, tasteless coffee, and went for a walk. Not because she wanted to, but because staying inside that empty house was worse. Charlotte was waking up slowly, with the timid sun tearing through the clouds, the smell of coffee wafting from the cafes, the noise of cars and people going about their normal lives. And there she was, in the middle of it all, completely invisible, completely lost. Sarah was walking past a small coffee shop on Central Avenue when suddenly everything collapsed. It wasn't a decision. It was as if her body had given up before her mind. She leaned against the brick wall, slid down to sit on the sidewalk, and began to cry. That way you cry when you can't hold it in anymore, when it doesn't matter who's watching. People walked by. They glanced sideways, some with pity, others with discomfort. But no one stopped. Until someone stopped. "Miss, are you okay?" The voice was masculine, soft, full of a genuine concern that Sarah hadn't heard in so long she'd almost forgotten what it sounded like. She lifted her tear-stained face and saw a man crouching in front of her. He was in his early 40s, with graying hair at the temples, calm, gentle brown eyes, and a small smile that didn't judge. It simply offered presence. I just need a minute," Sarah managed to say between sobs, embarrassed, wiping her face with her hands. "No rush," he said, and sat down on the ground beside her, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to sit on Charlotte's dirty sidewalk to keep company with a stranger who was falling apart. "My name is Daniel, by the way, Daniel Brooks." She looked at him, confused, still trying to catch her breath. "Sarah." "Nice to meet you, Sarah. Look, I know we don't know each other, but sometimes you just need someone, And it's okay not to be okay." He said this looking ahead, at the movement of the street, giving her space to process. And there was something about him, something Sarah couldn't explain, a peace that didn't make sense, a kind of presence that was calming just by being there. Sarah still doesn't know why she told him. Maybe because she had nothing left to lose. Maybe because Daniel had that way of listening that made you feel your words mattered. She told him about David, about her family, about the bills, about the feeling of sinking in a bottomless ocean, and he listened. Every word, without interrupting, without giving cheap advice. He just listened, with that look that understood the weight of her pain. When she finished, Daniel was silent for a moment, as if carefully choosing his words. Then he said, "Sarah, I don't know what you believe, but I believe that God never abandons anyone. Sometimes he lets us hit rock bottom, because that's when we finally look up. And I think you're not here by chance. Neither am I." And at that moment, something small, almost imperceptible, began to stir within Sarah's heart. A spark, a fragile hope, the size of a seed. She didn't know it yet, but that encounter on Charlotte's sidewalk was only the beginning of a story that God was writing with his own hands. Daniel didn't let that meeting end in empty conversation. He asked if Sarah had eaten anything. She hesitated, embarrassed, but he saw the answer in her eyes before she even spoke. "Come on," he said, getting up and extending his hand to help her up. "Let's get coffee. No strings attached, no pressure, just a decent meal." And for the first time in weeks, Sarah accepted someone's help. They went into a cozy cafe nearby, with that smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee that makes the world seem a little less hostile. Daniel ordered pancakes, scrambled eggs, and orange juice. Sarah ate slowly, in silence, feeling her stomach finally receive something that wasn't pure anxiety. He didn't ask intrusive questions. He didn't try to preach. He just talked about simple things, the weather, the city, how Charlotte had changed in recent years. And somehow, that was more comforting than any sermon could be. When they finished, Daniel wrote his number on a napkin. "Sarah, look, I know you don't know me, and I understand if you don't want to accept help. But if you need anything at all, call me. Okay?" She took the napkin with trembling hands, nodded, and left, still not quite believing what had just happened. 2 days later, Sarah was looking at her overdue electricity bill when the phone rang. Unknown number. She answered with a heavy heart, expecting another debt collector. But it was Daniel. "Hi, Sarah. Sorry to bother you. I was thinking, you said you work at the veterinary clinic, right? My car passes by there every day. If you want, I can give you a ride. Save on bus fare." Sarah was speechless. A ride? From a stranger? But at the same time, he didn't seem to have ulterior motives. There was something genuine, something safe. I don't want to bother you," she said, her voice high-pitched. "It's not work. It's the journey. And honestly, it would be nice to have company." Daniel said this so naturally that she ended up accepting, and that's how it began. Every morning, Daniel would pass by her house, say good morning with that calm smile, and they would walk together through the city. At first, Sarah barely spoke, but over time, she opened up. She would talk about work, about the little things of the day, about the fears that still haunted her in the early hours of the morning. And Daniel listened. And more than that, he helped. When he learned that Sarah was behind on her rent, he showed up at her house with an envelope. "It's not a loan. It's a gift. You don't owe me anything." She tried to refuse, no, but he was firm. "Sarah, let God work through people. God work through. You're not alone." And that day, for the first time since David left, Sarah cried tears that weren't just of pain. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something that was beginning to look like hope. But the real turning point came 3 weeks later when Daniel invited her to his church. Sarah had grown up going to church, but had drifted away after her life began to fall apart. The idea of returning brought a mix of nostalgia and fear. Fear of being judged, of not belonging, of not being good enough. "You don't need to be perfect to be there," Daniel said, as if reading her thoughts. "You just need to show up. God will take care of the rest." The following Sunday, Sarah entered New Hope Community Church with her heart pounding. It was an average church, full of all kinds of people, young, old, families, lonely people like herself. The music began, and Sarah felt something stir deep within her soul, as if a door locked for years was finally being opened. The pastor spoke about new beginnings, about how God transforms ashes into beauty, about how the end of one story can be the beginning of another, much better one. And Sarah cried. She cried without shame, because every word seemed to have been written for her. After the service, Daniel introduced Sarah to some people from the church. There was Carla, a woman in her 60s who hugged you as if she'd known you her whole life. Marcus, a young man who had lost his job and was taken in by the community until he got back on his feet. Jennifer, a single mother of 3, who offered to help with the bills. "We're not perfect," Carla said with that warm smile, "but we help each other. And now you're part of us." Sarah didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to this kind of love, unconditional, without demands, without judgment. And for the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not as a victim, not as a burden, but as someone who mattered, someone who had value, someone who deserved to be cared for. In the following months, Sarah's life began to change in ways she never imagined possible. The church helped with the most urgent bills. Carla invited her to Sunday lunches. Marcus connected her with a free computer course that could help her career. And Daniel remained there, not in an intrusive way, but in a constant way, like someone who plants a tree and has the patience to watch it grow. They started talking more. Not just about problems, but about dreams, about fears, about God, about what it means to rebuild a life after everything falls apart. Daniel shared that he had also gone through difficult times. He had lost his wife in a car accident 7 years earlier, and for a long time he thought he would never be able to open up to anyone again. "But God healed me slowly," he said, "and taught me that pain is not the end. Sometimes it's just the gateway to something new." Sarah listened, and for the first time, she began to believe that perhaps her pain wasn't the end either. Perhaps it was just a bend in the road. Perhaps God was truly preparing something she couldn't yet see. It was on a spring afternoon, while they sat on a park bench watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, that Sarah realized something. She looked at Daniel, The man who had appeared out of nowhere when she was devastated on the sidewalk. The man who had listened without judgment, helped without expecting anything in return, stayed without giving up, and felt something different in her chest. Something she was sure she would never feel again. Something that felt very much like the beginning of true love. But she was afraid of getting hurt again, afraid that it was all an illusion, afraid of not being good enough. Daniel noticed her silence and asked, in that soft voice that was already so familiar, "Is everything all right?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Daniel, have you ever thought that sometimes God puts people in our lives exactly when we need them most?" He smiled. "Every day, Sarah, every day." And at that moment, without either of them saying aloud, something changed. The friendship, which was already deep, began to transform into something more. Not in a rushed way, not in a desperate way, but in a natural, organic way, like flowers that bloom when the right season arrives. They began to spend more time together. Simple dinners, walks in the park, conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning, and with each moment, Sarah felt the old wounds being healed, the walls she had built around her heart being torn down brick by brick. Daniel was changing too. He had lived so long guarding his heart that he had almost forgotten what it was like to allow himself to feel again. But Sarah brought something back, a lightness, a joy, a reason to believe that new beginnings were still possible. "I wasn't looking for anyone," he confessed one night. "But God has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't he?" And Sarah, for the first time in years, laughed. She really laughed. And she replied, "Yes, there is. There's a lot." 6 months after that encounter on the sidewalk, Sarah and Daniel were officially together. It wasn't a grand proposal, no cinematic declaration. It was on a Sunday after church, when he held her hand and simply said, "I don't want to spend my days without you." And she, with tears of joy in her eyes, replied, "Me neither." The church community celebrated. Carla cried tears of joy. Marcus joked that he knew from the beginning. And Sarah, for the first time since David left, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be truly loved. Not in a conditional way, not in a self-serving way, but in a pure, true way that came from God and manifested itself through a man who had chosen to stay even when she was broken. But it wasn't all perfect, because real healing isn't linear, you know? There were nights when Sarah woke up sweating, dreaming about David, about the fights, about the abandonment. There were days when she looked at Daniel and thought, "What if he leaves me too? What if I'm not enough?" Daniel noticed. He always noticed. And in those moments, he didn't get angry. He didn't demand trust. He just held her face in his hands and said, "I'm not him, Sarah, and I'm not going anywhere." And Sarah was slowly learning that true love isn't the absence of fear. It's having fear and choosing to trust anyway. It's believing that not everyone will leave. It's allowing God to use human hands to rebuild what was destroyed. The big turning point came almost a year later, on a Saturday afternoon. Sarah was organizing some old boxes in the garage when she found an envelope that had been left behind. It was a letter from David, dated 3 weeks after he left. She had never seen it before. With trembling hands, and she opened it and read, "Sarah, I know I don't have the right to write this. I know I hurt you in a way that words won't fix. But I needed you to know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for being a coward. I'm so sorry for blaming you when I was actually running away from myself. You deserved better. You always did. And I hope that one day you find someone who values you the way I couldn't. Take care of yourself. David." Sarah read the letter 3 times, and for the first time, she didn't feel anger. She didn't feel hatred. She didn't feel the weight of the resentment she had carried for so long. She felt peace, because she had found someone who valued her, because God had transformed abandonment into a gateway to real love, because she had learned that forgiving isn't saying everything's okay. It's simply letting go of the weight so you can move on. That night, Sarah showed the letter to Daniel. He read it silently, then looked at her with that calm look that only he possessed. "And how do you feel?" "I feel free," Sarah replied, and realized it was true. I feel free to love you without carrying ghosts. I feel free to believe that the best is yet to come. Daniel smiled, pulled her into a tight hug, and whispered in her ear, so get ready, because the best is yet to come. 3 months later, on a starry night in the same park where they had talked about God and new beginnings, Daniel knelt before Sarah with a simple but meaningful ring. Sarah Mitchell, you taught me that God writes far better stories than we can imagine. You taught me that it's worth believing again, loving again, starting over again. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that true love exists, that God is faithful, and that you will never be alone again. Will you marry me? Sarah couldn't even speak. She just nodded, crying, laughing, her heart so full it felt like it was going to burst. And when he put the ring on her finger, she looked at the starry sky and whispered, "Thank you, God. Thank you for not abandoning me. Thank you for answering." The wedding was simple, but beautiful. It took place at New Hope Community Church, with Carla, Marcus, Jennifer, and the entire community that had helped Sarah get back on her feet. The pastor spoke about how God transforms tragedy into triumph, how he never wastes our pain, how every tear planted one day transforms into a harvest of joy. And when Sarah and Daniel exchanged vows, promising to love, honor, and walk together in faith, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. Sarah wore a simple white dress, but she was radiant, not because of the clothes, but because of the glow that came from within. The glow of someone who has been restored, who has been redeemed, who has found not only a husband, but a purpose, a family, a reason to believe that God truly makes all things work together for the good of those who love him. Life after marriage wasn't a perfect fairy tale. There were challenges, bills to pay, and difficult days. But the difference was that now Sarah wasn't facing anything alone. She had Daniel by her side. She had a church that was family, and above all, she had an unwavering faith that God was in control, even when things didn't make sense. 2 years after their wedding, Sarah and Daniel adopted a little girl. Emma was 5 years old, with curly hair, curious eyes, and a difficult story that needed to be rewritten with love. Sarah looked at that child and saw a little of herself, someone who needed to be chosen, someone who needed to know she was loved, someone who deserved a fresh start. And every night, before Emma went to sleep, Sarah would sit on the edge of the bed, hold her tiny hand and say, "You are loved, you are special, and God has beautiful plans for your life." And while she was saying this to Emma, Sarah was also speaking to that version of herself who one day sat on the cold living room floor and thought she had reached the end. She was saying to that broken, abandoned, hopeless woman, "See, God hasn't forgotten you. He was just preparing something you would never have the courage to ask for." Today, Sarah works at the veterinary clinic during the day and helps at church on weekends. Daniel remains that man of peace, that safe haven, that gift from God, wrapped in a way she never expected. And together, they help other people who are going through the valley, because those who have been rescued know exactly how to rescue others. There was a time when a young woman appeared at the church, broken adrift as if she had reached the end of the line. Sarah saw her sitting alone in the last pew, crying softly, and felt something familiar in her chest. She approached, sat beside her, and asked in that soft voice she had learned from Daniel, "Can I help?" And when the woman lifted her tear-stained face, Sarah smiled. That smile of someone who knows that God doesn't waste pain, that he transforms everything, that he uses even broken pieces to build something new and beautiful. And she whispered, "You're not alone. God hasn't abandoned you. I know because I've been exactly where you are, and look where he brought me." And there, on that church pew, another story of restoration began to be written, because that's how God works. He uses the healed to heal. He uses the rescued to rescue. He transforms ashes into beauty, mourning into joy, and abandonment into a new beginning. Sarah Mitchell is no longer that woman who sat on the dark floor whispering that she couldn't take it anymore. She is living proof that when you reach the end of yourself, that's when God finally has room to begin. She is proof that the most desperate prayer sometimes receives the most beautiful answer. She is proof that God's silence is not abandonment, it's just the interval before the miracle. And every time Sarah looks at Daniel, at Emma, at the life she has today, she remembers that morning when she collapsed on the sidewalk. She remembers the stranger who stopped. She remembers the "can I help you?" that changed everything. And she smiles because she understands now. God never answered with words. He answered with presence, with people, with love. And it was more than enough. Sarah's story teaches us that when God seems silent, He is not absent. He is working behind the scenes, preparing answers that go beyond what we can ask or imagine. The abandonment that seemed to be the end was only the beginning of something much greater. And the stranger who appeared at the right time was no coincidence. It was God saying, "I see you, I hear you, and I have never abandoned you." If you're going through a valley today, if everything seems to have fallen apart, if you've whispered in the dark thinking no one hears you, hold on tight, because God is preparing your story of a new beginning, and you can be sure it will be better than you imagine. If this story touched you, leave a like, comment what you thought, and subscribe to keep hearing stories like this. I'm also leaving a video here that you might enjoy.